At my own kitchen table, I read a legal petition declaring me senile. My daughter-in-law filed it. My son signed it. They want control of my life, my finances. I just smiled. They forgot one thing. I'm a judge. And this is my courtroom now. Here's how it all began. Like, share, and let me know where you're listening from. The cool morning light filtered through the kitchen window, illuminating the legal document spread across my polished oak table. My usually steady hands trembled slightly as I held the paper, its cold weight feeling heavier than any gavel I had ever wielded. I, Eleanor Vance, a woman of 64 years, a retired judge with a reputation for sharp intellect and unwavering fairness, was reading a petition that systematically painted me as senile, incompetent, and a danger to myself. The words blurred momentarily, then snapped into stark focus, each carefully chosen phrase a deliberate assault on my very identity. This wasn't just a random legal filing. This was an emergency guardianship petition, the kind reserved for individuals deemed utterly incapable of managing their own lives. And the petitioner? My own daughter-in-law, Cassandra Cassie Sterling. The name on the document felt like a branding iron, searing itself into my mind. Cassie, with her perfectly coiffed blonde hair and saccharine smile, was systematically dismantling my life, piece by calculated piece. Her allegations were a masterpiece of manipulation, precise and damning, yet utterly fabricated. Subject frequently forgets appointments and becomes confused about time and place, the petition stated, in its chillingly formal tone. My mind immediately flashed to last month's lunch with Margaret Jenkins, my dear friend. I had been precisely 20 minutes late, a minor oversight quickly remedied with a genuine apology, and Margaret's usual understanding chuckle. That simple, human error, blown out of proportion, twisted into proof of encroaching dementia. The audacity of it made my stomach clench. Then came the next accusation, equally insidious. Subject shows signs of paranoia and makes accusations against family members without basis. This one hit a nerve. It referred undoubtedly to the brief, uncomfortable conversation I'd had with Cassie just a few weeks prior. I had noticed some discrepancies in my online bank statements. Not major, but enough to pique my interest. When I politely inquired if she, as the one who sometimes helped me with digital tasks, had accessed my accounts for any reason, her reaction had been defensive, disproportionate. She'd accused me of distrust, of being overly suspicious. Now, it was paranoia, evidence of a crumbling mind. The gall was breathtaking. The petition continued, each line a fresh stab. Subject exhibits dangerous behavior such as leaving stove burners on and forgetting to lock doors. Again, my memory offered a clear counter-narrative. A month ago, after accepting a package from the delivery driver for Margaret, who was out, I'd briefly stepped away from the stove, where I'd been warming some tea. It was on for no more than 3 minutes unattended, a fleeting distraction quickly corrected. The door, too, had been unlocked for perhaps 10 minutes while I puttered in the garden, a rare lapse in an otherwise diligent routine. But in Cassie's version, these were not minor forgetfulness but dangerous behavior, a clear sign of impending catastrophe. A cold, hard realization settled over me, chilling me to the bone. Cassie hadn't just exaggerated. She had been watching me, documenting my every minor stumble, every fleeting moment of distraction. She had been compiling a dossier of my life, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. The thought of her observing me, meticulously cataloging normal human imperfections, made my skin crawl. This wasn't concern, it was surveillance. But the ultimate betrayal, the one that truly shattered my composure, lay in the 8th point. Subject's son, Ethan Vance, supports this petition out of concern for his mother's well-being and safety. Ethan, my son, the boy I had raised, nurtured, whose hand I had held through scraped knees and broken hearts. He was supporting this malicious attack on my autonomy. The words pulsed on the page, a cruel mockery of family loyalty. Moments later, as if on cue, my phone rang. It was Ethan. His voice, usually warm and steady, was strained, laced with an artificial earnestness that immediately set my teeth on edge. "Mom," he began, "Cassie and I..." We're just so worried about you. Worried about what exactly, Ethan? I asked, my voice calm despite the tremor in my chest. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but I forced myself to maintain a measured tone. This was a legal matter, and I was, first and foremost, a judge. Have I ever been anything but independent and capable? Have I ever asked you for a dime? Or for help with anything I couldn't manage myself? He hesitated, then launched into a litany of pre-rehearsed concerns. Well, you're getting older, Mom. And, forgetting things. Leaving appliances on. My mind registered the familiar phrasing immediately. These weren't his observations, his worries, voiced from genuine concern. These were Cassie's words, her carefully constructed allegations, coming out of his mouth. He was merely her puppet, repeating lines he'd been fed. The sting of it was profound. Ethan? I cut him off, my voice sharper now, demanding a direct answer. When have you personally witnessed any of these incidents? Have you seen me leave the stove on, or forget an appointment that truly mattered? His response was a mumbled confession, confirming my darkest suspicions. Well, Cassie, told me about them. She's just so concerned, Mom. We both are. The phone call ended, leaving me in a deafening silence. The shock began to recede, replaced by a cold, unwavering resolve. I pushed aside the emotional debris. I was not a victim, I decided. I was the target of a complex case, and I would approach it as such. My legal mind, honed over decades in courtrooms, began to whir, sifting through facts, identifying weaknesses, strategizing a defense. The hearing was set for next Friday, a mere 5 days away. 5 days to fight for my financial independence, my freedom, my very identity. If I lost, I would lose everything. The urgency was palpable. My first thought was to call David Chen, a brilliant attorney I'd worked with for years, but I quickly dismissed the idea. Hiring a lawyer, especially one of David's caliber, could be perceived by the court as an admission of guilt, a tacit acknowledgement of my alleged incompetence. No, I would represent myself. I would face Cassie Sterling, and the court, on my own terms. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was a testament to my life, my mind, and my unwavering spirit. After Ethan's unsettling call and the brutal clarity of the legal document, I found myself replaying months of interactions with Cassie as if reviewing a meticulously crafted deposition. Her seemingly innocent gestures, her helpful suggestions, all now appeared tainted with an insidious ulterior motive. Her insistence on setting up my new online banking portal, her unsolicited advice on organizing my appointments, her sympathetic clucking over my occasional forgetfulness. Each instance that I had dismissed as merely overly zealous kindness now clicked into place, pieces of a sinister puzzle. Her solicitous inquiries about my health, her gentle suggestions that I might want to take it easy, had been nothing but carefully planted seeds, designed to cultivate a narrative of decline. The woman hadn't been helping. She had been gathering evidence, building her case against me with an almost terrifying precision. The most painful part, though, wasn't Cassie's duplicity. It was the realization that my son, Ethan, my only child, had chosen to believe her. How could he, the boy who knew me better than anyone, whose entire life had been shaped by my strength and clear-headedness, so readily accept this monstrous caricature of his mother? Had he so easily forgotten my years on the bench, my sharp intellect, my unwavering independence? The betrayal was a deep, searing wound, deeper than any Cassie could inflict. It wasn't just my autonomy at stake. It was my son's trust, his love, his perception of who I was. And he had allowed Cassie to poison it. But the retired judge in me, Eleanor Vance, the woman who had spent decades fighting for justice in countless courtrooms, refused to be a passive victim. The initial shock gave way to a cold, burning determination. This wasn't just a personal attack. It was a calculated campaign. And I would fight back with every fiber of my being. My legal mind, dormant in retirement, now sparked to life, analyzing, strategizing, preparing for battle. 3 days after the petition landed on my doorstep, the psychological warfare began in earnest. I felt a creeping sense of unease, a gnawing suspicion that wasn't entirely unfamiliar, yet suddenly far more acute. It made me question my own judgment, made me feel the very paranoia Cassie was alleging. I was at the grocery store, a mundane Tuesday afternoon ritual, comparing the prices of 2 different brands of rolled oats. My mind was half on my upcoming legal strategy, half on my grocery list. As I deliberated between organic and conventional, a movement in my peripheral vision caught my eye. Brenda Davies, a woman I recognized as one of Cassie's closest friends, stood a few aisles over, seemingly engrossed in her phone. But something was off. Her arm was extended, her phone subtly angled in my direction. My vision, still remarkably keen for my age, caught the telltale gleam of the camera lens, pointed directly at me. A sudden chill snaked down my spine. Was she filming me? Documenting my mundane act of comparing oatmeal prices? My heart began to pound with a slow, heavy rhythm. I straightened up, dropping the oatmeal back onto the shelf with a slightly louder thud than intended. My gaze met hers, direct and unwavering. Brenda, startled, fumbled with her phone, her cheeks flushing a telltale pink. She quickly lowered her arm, pressing buttons on the screen with a frantic energy. "Brenda," I said, my voice calm but laced with an icy edge that would have made lawyers in my courtroom tremble. "Is there something I can help you with?" She started, looking as if she'd been caught shoplifting. "Eleanor! Oh my goodness. I didn't even see you there." Her smile was brittle, her eyes darting nervously. "Filming? No, of course not. I was just checking my messages." She held up her phone, displaying a blank screen, a pathetic attempt at deception. I simply nodded, holding her gaze until she visibly squirmed, then turned and pushed my cart away, leaving her standing amidst the cereals. The incident left a sour taste in my mouth, solidifying my suspicions. That same afternoon, the phone rang. It was Mrs. Albright, my sweet, elderly neighbor who lived 2 doors down. We often exchanged pleasantries and shared gardening tips. Her voice, usually cheerful, held an uncharacteristic tremor, a note of hesitant concern. "Eleanor, dear," she began, "I hope you don't mind me asking, but are you feeling all right? Everything all right at home?" My grip tightened on the phone receiver. "I'm perfectly fine, Mrs. Albright." "Why do you ask?" I already knew the answer, felt it in my bones. She sighed, a fragile, wavering sound. "Well, dear, Cassie paid me a visit yesterday. She seemed ever so worried about you." Mrs. Albright hesitated, then continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "She mentioned some memory issues, dear. And she asked me to keep an eye on you, in case I noticed anything amiss." The confirmation hit me like a physical blow, yet it wasn't unexpected. My daughter-in-law wasn't just filing legal documents, she was waging a covert war, systematically approaching my social circle, planting seeds of doubt, turning friends and neighbors into unwitting spies. She was constructing an echo chamber, where her manufactured concerns would be reflected back to her as legitimate worries, solidifying her narrative. Mrs. Albright, bless her kind heart, seemed genuinely conflicted. "I told her," I said. "Cassie, Eleanor's always been sharp as a tack, never seen a day when she wasn't perfectly capable. But Cassie, she seemed so insistent, so worried, said it was early stages and that you might not even realize it yourself." The desperation in Cassie's voice, the feigned concern, had clearly swayed my well-meaning neighbor, at least initially. The insidious nature of Cassie's strategy was now chillingly clear. She wasn't relying solely on legal maneuvers. She was meticulously poisoning my reputation, undermining my credibility within my own community. She was positioning herself as the expert on my condition, the caring relative privy to my secret decline, effectively training others to see confusion where there was merely contemplation, forgetfulness where there was a fleeting distraction, and paranoia where there was justified suspicion. She was trying to isolate me, to make me doubt myself, and to ensure that when I inevitably spoke up, my words would be dismissed as the ramblings of a woman losing her mind. The campaign of doubt was escalating. Just 2 days after the unsettling encounter with Brenda Davies and Mrs. Albright's revelation, my son, Ethan, and Cassie arrived unannounced. I was in my rose garden, a beloved sanctuary where I spent many hours, finding solace in the earth and the vibrant blooms. My hands were gloved, a light sheen of dirt on my arms, a few stray leaves clinging to my apron. I looked, in short, perfectly content and engaged in a healthy, productive activity. They pulled up in Cassie's sleek SUV, the engine still running as they both got out. Ethan, usually so careful with his appearance, looked surprisingly disheveled, his shirt untucked, a smear of something dark on his cheek. Cassie, though, was impeccable, her carefully applied makeup a stark contrast to the dust on my garden tools. Ethan approached with a new air of concerned condescension. It was a tone I hadn't heard from him before, a subtle implication of my frailty. "Mom," he began, his voice higher than usual, a forced worry in his tone. "What are you doing out here? You're going to get all dirty." Cassie exchanged a meaningful, almost triumphant, look with Ethan. Her voice, sweet and dripping with feigned concern, floated across the garden. "Eleanor, sweetheart, it's almost 90 degrees out here. You'll get heat stroke." I glanced at my outdoor thermometer, then at the clear blue sky. It was a pleasant mid-70s, a perfect temperature for gardening. I recognized the trap instantly. Correcting her would make me appear argumentative, even combative, fitting neatly into her narrative of paranoia and irritability. Agreeing would confirm their manufactured perception of my poor judgment. I chose neutrality, a tactic I'd employed countless times in court. "I was just finishing up," I said, peeling off my gardening gloves, a faint smile playing on my lips. "The roses are looking particularly lovely today." Inside the cool confines of my living room, Cassie launched into a theatrical performance of solicitousness. She bustled about, fetching me a glass of iced water, then hovering, inspecting my arms for sunburn, clucking about the importance of sunscreen. Ethan, bless his naive heart, seemed to fall for it, watching her with an almost admiring gaze, as if she were a veritable Florence Nightingale tending to a frail patient. It was a stark reminder of how thoroughly she had him ensnared. Once the charade subsided, Ethan cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably on the antique velvet armchair. "Mom," he began, his voice softer now, "we wanted to talk to you about getting some help around the house." He paused, avoiding my gaze. "Maybe someone to come in a few times a week. Help with the cleaning, the cooking." I met his eyes steadily, my voice firm, unwavering. "I don't need help with cleaning and cooking, Ethan. I've been managing this house perfectly well for 23 years, and I assure you, my capabilities haven't diminished one iota." Cassie leaned forward, her expression morphing into one of profound empathy. "But things change as we get older, Eleanor. It's perfectly natural. We just want you to be comfortable, not have to worry about the day-to-day chores." The implication was clear. I was too old, too fragile, too forgetful to manage my own home. "What things have changed, Cassie?" I asked, my voice laced with a pointed clarity that startled even her. "Specifically? Can you give me an example of something I'm no longer capable of doing? Something that necessitates a stranger coming into my home to manage my life?" Her carefully constructed facade wavered for a fraction of a second. She glanced at Ethan, then back at me. "Well," she started, picking her words carefully. "Ethan mentioned that when he called last week, you seemed confused about what day it was when he asked you to make plans." I suppressed a sigh. "Ethan," I said, turning my gaze to my son, "checking one's calendar before making plans isn't confusion, it's organization. It's ensuring I don't double book myself, a practice I've maintained for over 40 years, both in my professional life and now in retirement." The memory of that call was clear. Ethan had asked if I was free next Tuesday, and I had simply said, "Let me check my calendar before I commit." A reasonable, responsible action, now twisted into evidence of mental decline. Cassie's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, a fleeting flash of irritation crossing her features. But she quickly recovered, pulling her mask of concern back into place. "Of course, Eleanor, we understand. We all love you and want to make sure you're safe and comfortable." The words, meant to soothe, now sounded hollow and menacing. They left soon after, their mission accomplished, or so they thought. The house felt eerily quiet after they departed, the air still thick with their manufactured worries. I didn't let the unsettling visit fester. Instead, I immediately went to my study, opened a new file, and meticulously documented every detail. The date, time, their unannounced arrival, the manufactured temperature discrepancy, Cassie's performance, Ethan's hesitant delivery of their insidious suggestion, and my precise rebuttals. I was building my own case file, not against a defendant, but against my own family. That evening, a minor accident occurred. While preparing dinner, a splash of marinade dripped onto the hot stovetop. It sizzled, smoked, and within seconds, the shrill shriek of my smoke alarm pierced the quiet evening. I quickly opened a window, fanned the air, and turned off the burner. The alarm silenced itself after a minute, and the smell dissipated. A routine occurrence, easily managed. Yet, less than 20 minutes later, the flashing lights of a fire truck filled my front yard. The loud clang of equipment, the heavy footsteps, the worried faces of 2 firefighters at my door, my heart pounded. "Mrs. Vance?" the captain asked, his voice professional but tinged with concern. "We received a call about a possible fire. The caller said they were worried about an elderly resident who might be in danger." My blood ran cold. Cassie. It had to be Cassie. She was meticulously cataloging every perceived misstep, then weaponizing it. The smoke alarm, a momentary inconvenience, now elevated to a dangerous emergency, designed to paint me as a senile woman, incapable of managing her own home. The firefighters quickly assessed the situation, saw no actual danger, and left with apologetic smiles. But the incident galvanized me. I picked up my phone, my fingers flying to a number I hadn't dialed in years for anything other than a friendly chat. It was my friend, Judge Evelyn Reed, a formidable jurist renowned for her work in family law. I recounted everything: the petition, the grocery store incident, Mrs. Albright, Ethan's visit, the fire department. Evelyn listened patiently, her silence more potent than any interruption. When I finished, there was a pause. Then her voice, firm and unwavering, came through the receiver. "Eleanor, this isn't just a misunderstanding or a family dispute. This is elder abuse, classic financial and emotional manipulation. And you, my dear, need to fight this with everything you've got." Her words resonated, strengthening my resolve. I would not just fight. I would win. The heavy oak doors of the courthouse, doors I had walked through thousands of times as a respected jurist, felt different today. Each step echoed with a strange finality, as I entered not as a judge, but as a defendant, stripped of my title, my reputation under assault. The air inside, usually a familiar blend of old paper and polished wood, now carried a faint scent of apprehension, a premonition of the battle ahead. My gaze swept across the courtroom, a space intimately familiar. Presiding today was Judge Arthur Maxwell, a colleague I'd known professionally for decades. His face, usually open, was now a carefully constructed mask of impartiality, betraying no hint of our shared past. I offered him a subtle, almost imperceptible nod, acknowledging the delicate tightrope he now walked. The gallery was surprisingly crowded. Cassie had done her work well, priming the audience to see me not as a formidable judge, but as a tragic figure. A once sharp mind now succumbing to the cruel ravages of age. Sympathetic murmurs rustled through the benches, a subtle undercurrent of pity that felt like an insult. I walked to the respondents' table and sat down, alone. The empty chair beside me was a deliberate choice. Hiring an attorney, I reasoned, would only lend credence to their claims. A silent admission that I was indeed too incompetent to represent myself. No, I would face this fight head-on, with my own intellect and my own voice. Cassie sat at the petitioner's table, flanked by her attorney, George Finch. Finch was a specialist in elder law, a man whose reputation for ruthless efficiency and emotionally manipulative tactics preceded him. He rose, his dark suit impeccable, his demeanor one of profound gravity. His opening statement was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation, a calculated assault on my character masquerading as a plea for compassion. His voice, deep and resonant, was dripping with practiced sympathy as he painted a picture of a once brilliant woman experiencing a heartbreaking decline. He spoke of my forgetfulness, my dangerous tendencies, my growing confusion, each phrase carefully designed to elicit pity and concern from the court and the gallery. He ended by declaring that Cassie, my loving daughter-in-law, was acting purely out of love and concern for my well-being, not for any personal gain. The audacity of it almost made me laugh aloud. Love and concern, indeed. It was a thinly veiled grab for my assets, my independence, my very life. But I kept my expression neutral, my gaze steady. Finch then called his first witness, Dr. Julian Thorne. The doctor, a man I had never met in my life, strode confidently to the stand. His testimony was clinically detached, delivered in a measured, authoritative tone. He claimed to have evaluated me, not through direct examination, but based on detailed reports from concerned family members. He diagnosed signs consistent with early-stage dementia, citing a host of symptoms that perfectly mirrored Cassie's petition. He concluded that independent living posed significant safety risks for me, given the documented incidents. My blood simmered, but I maintained my composure. This was my moment. Dr. Thorne, I began, rising slowly, my voice clear and firm, echoing through the silent courtroom. You mentioned that your evaluation was based solely on reports from family members. Did you personally examine me at any point? He adjusted his glasses. No, I did not, Mrs. Vance. Did you review my comprehensive medical records, Dr. Thorne? My history with my primary care physician, my neurologists, my routine blood work? No, he admitted, a flicker of discomfort in his eyes. That was not part of the scope of this particular assessment. And did you perform any standard cognitive or neurological tests, such as the MMSE or MoCA, typically used to diagnose dementia? No, he repeated, his confidence waning slightly. My assessment was based on the behavioral observations reported by the petitioner. So, Dr. Thorne, I pressed, my voice gaining strength. Your diagnosis of signs consistent with early-stage dementia is based entirely on anecdotal reports from my daughter-in-law, without any direct medical examination, review of my medical history, or objective cognitive testing. He squirmed. It's an assessment based on the presented information. Yes. Those reports are highly indicative. Highly indicative, I echoed, letting the words hang in the air. Doctor, if I told you that I could, right now, recite from memory the entire Bill of Rights and every single one of the 27 constitutional amendments, along with the historical context of their ratification, would that change your assessment of my cognitive function? He stammered, caught off guard. Well, that would certainly suggest a high level of cognitive recall, but it doesn't preclude other forms of impairment. It was a weak deflection, and everyone in the courtroom knew it. I let it stand, a small victory. Next, Cassie's parade of witnesses began. Mrs. Albright, my kind neighbor, took the stand, her face etched with genuine distress. She recounted Cassie's visit, her fabricated worries, and how she was asked to keep an eye on me. She spoke hesitantly about my confusion, referring to the minor incident where I had briefly paused to check my calendar. Under my cross-examination, she admitted, Well, no, dear. You've always been sharp as a tack. But Cassie seemed so worried. The damage, however, was done. Brenda Davies, Cassie's friend, followed, recounting her accidental filming of me at the grocery store. Under my questioning, she became flustered, denying any deliberate intent to film, claiming she was merely checking her messages. But the image of a surveillance camera, aimed at my private life, lingered. Finally, the fire department captain took the stand, a man of integrity, uncomfortable with the position he was in. He testified about the smoke alarm incident, confirming that they had received a call about an elderly resident in danger. I asked him directly, Captain, was there any actual fire? Was there any structural damage to my home? Was anyone, myself included, in any actual danger? He cleared his throat, looking at me with a measure of respect. No, Mrs. Vance. There was no actual fire. No danger to anyone or any property. It was a minor smoke alarm activation from cooking, easily resolved. His words were a clear exoneration. Yet the cumulative effect of the witnesses, the relentless drip, drip, drip of manufactured concern, painted a damning picture to an impartial observer. The seeds of doubt had been sown, deeply and effectively. The courtroom drama is only just beginning, and the stakes couldn't be higher. If you're finding this story as gripping as I am, please do me a favor. Hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a single twist. Your support means the world to me. Now, back to the fight for my life. My heart, which I thought had been hardened by years on the bench, by the weight of so many difficult decisions, broke into a million pieces as my son, Ethan, walked to the witness box. He refused to meet my eyes, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond me, on the wall behind the judge. He looked like a man being led to his own execution, a silent plea for forgiveness in every hesitant step. George Finch, Cassie's attorney, approached Ethan with a gentle, almost paternal air. His questions were soft, designed to portray Ethan not as a participant in this scheme, but as a loving son making an agonizing decision, forced by circumstance to act against his own mother's wishes for her own good. Ethan's voice, when he finally spoke, was thick with what appeared to be genuine anguish. It's been so hard," he began, his eyes moist. He recounted Cassie's fabricated concerns, parrot fashion, just as he had on the phone. She seems confused about time, about appointments. She's been making strange financial decisions. There are safety issues, leaving things on the stove, forgetting to lock the doors. He leaned forward, his voice cracking, and tears welled in his eyes. "I don't think she is. She's not herself anymore, and it kills me to say that. But I can't live with myself if something happens to her because I didn't act." He buried his face in his hands, a performance worthy of an Oscar. The gallery murmured with sympathy. When it was my turn to question him, the silence in the courtroom was absolute. I rose, my legs feeling strangely steady, my voice betraying none of the turmoil raging within me. "Ethan," I began, my voice soft, almost a whisper, yet it carried clearly through the hushed room. "You mentioned strange financial decisions. Could you elaborate on what specifically you're referring to?" He lifted his head, eyes still red-rimmed. "You know, unusual expenditures." "Unusual expenditures?" I pressed gently. "Are you referring to the substantial donation I made last month to the university's law school scholarship fund, in memory of your grandfather?" Ethan blinked, genuinely surprised. No, I didn't know about that." He shifted uncomfortably. Cassie mentioned some things. "So, you have no knowledge of my assets, my debts, my regular expenses, do you, Ethan?" I asked, my gaze unwavering. He swallowed hard. "No, Mom. Not really. Cassie usually she knows more about that." "And yet," I continued, my voice gaining a quiet intensity, "you are here, under oath, testifying about my strange financial decisions and my inability to manage my own affairs, even though you admit to having no personal knowledge of my financial situation." Ethan looked utterly stricken, as if I had physically slapped him. The carefully constructed facade of the loving, agonized son began to crack. He whispered, barely audible, "Mom, I just want to protect you." "From what, sweetheart?" I challenged him, my voice piercing the fragile calm. "From continuing to live the same responsible, independent life I've lived for decades? From making my own choices, including how I choose to honor your grandfather's legacy?" George Finch, seeing his witness crumble, sprang to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is badgering the witness." Judge Maxwell, though impassive, allowed my line of questioning for a moment longer before sustaining the objection. But the damage was done. Ethan's testimony, so heartfelt and convincing moments before, now appeared hollow, based on hearsay and manipulation, not genuine knowledge or concern. He was excused, his shoulders slumped, unable to meet my gaze. Then came the pièce de résistance. Cassie Sterling. She was called as the star witness, and she walked to the stand with an air of practiced confidence, perfectly composed, her blonde hair gleaming under the courtroom lights. She exuded an aura of refined elegance, the picture of a worried, loving daughter-in-law pushed to her breaking point. Her testimony was a tour de force of crocodile tears and manufactured concern. She spoke of her deep love for me, her anguish at witnessing my supposed decline. Every phrase was carefully chosen, every pause timed for maximum emotional impact. It started subtly, she began, her voice quivering slightly. Little things, forgetting a name, misplacing her keys. But then it escalated. She leaned forward, her eyes glistening. Last month, I found her standing in her kitchen at 2 o'clock in the morning, dressed in her old judge's robes, insisting it was time to go to work and asking me if the court was still in session. A gasp rippled through the gallery. The lie was so outrageous, so specific, that it sounded terrifyingly real. I had never, not once in my life, confused day with night, nor had I ever, after retirement, put on my judge's robes, except for a rare ceremonial event. The sheer audacity of it left me momentarily speechless, she continued, weaving a tapestry of invention. She's been giving away family heirlooms to strangers, people she barely knows. The antique locket, the silver tea set, just handing them out. More gasps. And the doors, she constantly leaves them unlocked. And the stove, after the fire department incident, I'm just terrified she'll burn the house down. She twisted the smoke alarm incident, which the captain had confirmed was a non-event, into a narrative of my alarming incompetence. Then came the final, most poisonous lie, delivered with a fresh flood of tears and a sorrowful shake of her head. And the worst part, Your Honor, she told Ethan. She told him he was a disappointment, that she wished she'd never had children. The words hung in the air, a cruel, vicious blow designed to shatter any remaining bond between my son and me. I saw Ethan in the gallery, his face devastated, hearing this for the first time. The depth of Cassie's malice was truly astounding. She wasn't just trying to control my life. She was trying to destroy my relationships, my legacy, my very soul. The courtroom broke for a short recess after Cassie's performance. I remained at the respondents' table, feeling the cold weight of the marble, the echoing silence, a stark contrast to the buzzing activity in the hallway. I watched through the open doors as Cassie held court, surrounded by sympathetic faces, many of whom were her friends, nodding along to her tearful recounting of my alleged decline. She basked in their pity, her mask of anguish firmly in place. Ethan stood a few feet away, his head bowed, looking utterly guilty and confused. He didn't approach me, and I made no move to approach him. The chasm between us, carefully engineered by Cassie, felt impossibly wide. When Judge Arthur Maxwell returned, his entrance silenced the room. I felt the familiar stir of adrenaline, the weight of 30 years of legal experience settling over me. This was it, my chance to defend myself, not just against Cassie, but against the insidious narrative she had meticulously constructed. I would reclaim my life, my reputation, and my dignity. The respondent may call her first witness, Judge Maxwell stated, his gaze briefly meeting mine. Thank you, Your Honor, I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the inner turmoil. I call Dr. Helen Miller to the stand. Dr. Miller, my personal physician for the past 12 years, walked to the witness box with an air of quiet professionalism. She was a woman of unwavering integrity, someone whose word carried immense weight. After the preliminaries, I began my questioning. Dr. Miller, you have been my primary care physician for over a decade. In your professional opinion, how would you describe my cognitive function? Dr. Miller looked directly at Judge Maxwell, her expression serious. Mrs. Vance's memory is sharp, her reasoning clear, and her overall cognitive function is all within normal ranges for someone of her age. I conduct routine cognitive assessments as part of her annual physical, and she consistently performs exceptionally well. And her general health, doctor? I continued. Mrs. Vance is in excellent health for her age, Dr. Miller confirmed. She manages her own medications, maintains an active lifestyle, and has no medical conditions that would impair her independence or judgment. In all our interactions, Mrs. Vance has been articulate, well-informed about her health, and completely competent to make her own decisions. George Finch rose for cross-examination, his tone insinuating. Dr. Miller, isn't it true that early-stage dementia can be subtle? That even a competent physician might miss the initial signs if not specifically looking for them? Dr. Miller met his gaze calmly. While early signs can be subtle, Mr. Finch, Mrs. Vance, undergoes regular, comprehensive evaluations. Furthermore, I am trained to look for such signs. Based on my 12 years of close observation and medical evaluation, I stand by my assessment. There is no medical evidence to suggest Mrs. Vance is experiencing any form of cognitive decline or dementia. Finch, unable to shake her, eventually sat down. Next, I made a calculated move. I call Mrs. Albright back to the stand. Mrs. Albright, looking even more uncomfortable than before, returned. I approached her with a respectful, gentle tone. Mrs. Albright, when you testified earlier, you mentioned that you became concerned about my well-being. Can you tell the court who first raised these concerns with you? She wrung her hands. It was Cassie, dear. And prior to Mrs. Sterling speaking to you, had you, in your daily interactions with me, noticed anything concerning about my behavior, my memory, or my ability to manage my affairs? She hesitated, glancing at Cassie, then back at me. But after Mrs. Sterling spoke to you, I continued, did you then begin to keep an eye on me, as she requested? Mrs. Albright sighed, a weary sound. Well, yes, I suppose I did. I started looking for signs, like she said. And what did you find, Mrs. Albright? Did you observe these memory issues or dangerous behaviors that Mrs. Sterling described? She shook her head. Not really. No. You've been the same, Eleanor. You've always been. A bit late for lunch once. That's all. And you're always so polite. Her voice gained a little strength as she looked directly at me. I felt bad, Eleanor. I truly did. So, your initial testimony, where you described your concerns about my mental state, was based entirely on what Cassie told you to look for and report, rather than your own independent observations? Mrs. Albright mumbled, almost inaudibly. Finally, it was my turn to testify in my own defense. I took the stand, not as a defendant, but as a judge, delivering a verdict on the truth. I methodically refuted each allegation, dissecting Cassie's narrative piece by piece. I provided context for the 20 minutes late to lunch, explaining it was a rare occurrence with Margaret Jenkins, a friend who understood. I clarified the financial decisions, detailing my donation to the law school and showing documented proof of my meticulous financial planning. The smoke alarm incident was described as a minor cooking mishap, swiftly resolved, with the fire captain's own testimony reinforcing its harmlessness. I systematically exposed Cassie's lies, not with anger, but with cold, hard facts. Every single incident described by Mrs. Cassandra Sterling, I stated, my voice clear and unwavering, addressing Judge Maxwell directly, either never happened or has been grossly distorted for the sole purpose of fabricating a case for guardianship. There was no court appearance, no giving away of heirlooms, and no cruel words spoken to my son. I glanced at Ethan, who now looked thoroughly ashamed. His head once again bowed. George Finch's cross-examination was swift, an attempt to salvage what he could. Mrs. Vance, he began, isn't it true that you are resistant to any form of help, that your judgment might be impaired in your inability to see your own need for assistance? I met his gaze, my legal mind fully engaged. Mr. Finch, is it possible that a woman who has spent 30 years making complex legal decisions, weighing evidence, and assessing credibility, a woman who has managed her own finances, her own home, and her own life with impeccable responsibility for decades, might actually be competent to assess her own needs and determine what help is genuinely required? Yes, I believe that's not only possible, but profoundly probable. The courtroom was silent, absorbing my words. My defense was built not on emotion, but on logic, on evidence, and on the unshakable truth of my life. After methodically dismantling Cassie's manufactured narrative, I turned to Judge Maxwell. "Your Honor," I stated, my voice ringing with a newfound authority. "I would now like to present Exhibit A." A court clerk, a young woman named Sarah Rodriguez who had politely avoided my gaze all day, handed me a thick binder. I placed it on the stand, opening it to reveal a meticulously compiled timeline. "This, Your Honor," I announced, "is a comprehensive timeline, painstakingly documented by myself over the past 6 months. It details every single incident described by Mrs. Sterling, alongside the actual truth, complete with dates, witnesses, and verifiable facts. It documents every distortion, every exaggeration, and every outright fabrication designed to present a false image of my cognitive state." As I spoke, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. People in the gallery, who had initially listened with sympathetic murmurs, now leaned forward, their faces etched with dawning realization. They began to notice the gaping inconsistencies between Cassie's tearful testimony and the logical, fact-based defense I was presenting. The carefully constructed narrative of my tragic decline was unraveling before their eyes. Judge Maxwell, who had maintained his impartial mask throughout the proceedings, now looked directly at me, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. He posed a pivotal question, his voice slow and deliberate. "Mrs. Vance, this entire court proceeding, from your meticulous preparation of exhibits to your masterful cross-examination of witnesses, requires a significant understanding of legal processes, a sharp intellect, and a formidable grasp of detail. How do you reconcile this level of competence with the allegations of cognitive decline presented by the petitioner?" I took a deep breath. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the carefully timed reveal I had meticulously planned. "Your Honor," I began, my voice clear and resonant, filling every corner of the silent courtroom. "I reconcile it by pointing out, unequivocally, that the allegations are false." I paused, allowing the gravity of my words to sink in. "And I reconcile it by revealing a crucial piece of information that has, for reasons that will become apparent, been deliberately omitted by the petitioner." I looked directly at Judge Maxwell, then swept my gaze across the gallery, letting my eyes linger for a moment on Ethan, then on the rapidly paling face of Cassie. "I am Eleanor Vance," I declared, my voice resonating with decades of authority. "And for the past 28 years, I have served as a judge in this very courthouse." A collective gasp swept through the courtroom, followed by a deafening silence. Then, a cacophony of murmurs erupted, quickly suppressed by a stern look from Judge Maxwell. His eyes, initially wide with shock, narrowed as he fought to maintain his composure. The gavel, usually wielded for order, lay still, almost trembling on the bench. He looked at me, then at the thick file on his desk, his expression unreadable. "This court," he announced, his voice firmer than before, "will take a brief recess to review court records." The gavel fell with a decisive thud, the sound echoing ominously in the suddenly electric air. Cassie's face, usually so perfectly composed, went utterly white. Her eyes darted around the courtroom, looking genuinely afraid for the first time. The mask had finally slipped. Ethan stared at me, his mouth slightly open, a mixture of shock, confusion, and a dawning understanding etched on his face. The realization of what he had allowed himself to be a part of was finally hitting him. During the recess, the news spread like wildfire through the courthouse. Whispers turned into excited chatter. Court clerks, like Sarah Rodriguez, who had been avoiding my gaze earlier, now approached me, their faces alight with shock and a kind of whispered awe. "Judge Vance," Sarah breathed, her eyes wide. "I can't believe it. You were the Honorable Eleanor Vance?" Others nodded, their respect for me visibly returning, amplified by the shocking reveal. Ethan stood across the hall, still rooted to the spot, his face a complex mixture of confusion, shame, and the undeniable beginning of recognition. He saw not just his mother, but the formidable woman she truly was. Cassie, however, was nowhere to be seen in the immediate vicinity. I heard her voice, sharp and urgent, coming from the hallway around the corner, clearly on the phone, Her composure finally shattered. When Judge Maxwell reconvened the court, his demeanor had changed completely. His expression was no longer one of mere impartiality, but of a man who felt a deep sense of professional affront. He cleared his throat, his gaze sweeping over everyone in the room. "Let the record reflect," he announced, his voice resonating with authority, "that the respondent, Eleanor Vance, served with distinction as a superior court judge in this courthouse for 28 years before her retirement 3 years ago." He then fixed his gaze on George Finch, his tone laced with a distinct displeasure. "Mr. Finch, I am troubled by the fact that your client, Mrs. Cassandra Sterling, failed to disclose Mrs. Vance's professional background in her petition. This omission, whether intentional or not, casts a considerable shadow over the veracity of the claims made in this guardianship petition." I seized the moment, pressing my advantage. "Your Honor," I stated, "if I may present further evidence." I handed over a meticulously compiled portfolio. "Here, Your Honor, is a detailed financial analysis of my accounts, demonstrating not only perfect solvency, but exemplary financial management, with no strange decisions whatsoever." I then presented correspondence from various organizations where I actively volunteered, including a legal aid clinic and a local historical society. "These letters," I explained, "attest to my continued active engagement in my community, my clear cognitive function, and the absence of any concerns regarding my competence from those who interact with me regularly." The evidence, coupled with the revelation of my identity, was a powerful, undeniable force. The tide had turned. The courtroom was electric, charged with the revelation of my true identity and the unfolding truth of Cassie's deception. But I wasn't finished. I had one more weapon, my nuclear option, meticulously prepared and waiting for the perfect moment. "Your Honor," I stated, my voice cutting through the lingering murmurs, "I would now like to present Exhibit B, a copy of my personal phone records." I handed the documents to Sarah Rodriguez, who, now visibly eager to assist, presented them to Judge Maxwell. "These records," I explained, "reveal a clear pattern of communication between Mrs. Cassandra Sterling and several witnesses in this case, particularly in the days and hours leading up to their respective testimonies." George Finch was on his feet in an instant. "Objection, Your Honor! Irrelevant hearsay, and a breach of privacy." "Mr. Finch," I countered calmly, "these are my phone records, documenting calls made to my number or between known parties related to this case, which I am legally entitled to present. The relevance, I assure you, will become abundantly clear." Judge Maxwell, his earlier displeasure now hardening into outright suspicion, waved Finch back to his seat. Objection overruled. "Proceed, Mrs. Vance." I methodically detailed the calls. On the evening before Brenda Davies' testimony, Mrs. Sterling called Miss Davies 4 times. On the morning of Mrs. Albright's testimony, there were 3 calls. And most disturbingly, Your Honor, just 10 minutes before the fire department was dispatched to my home, Mrs. Sterling placed a call to an unknown number, immediately followed by a brief call to the fire department's non-emergency line. I paused, allowing the implications to sink in. "Your Honor, this pattern suggests witness coordination that goes far beyond normal case preparation. It suggests witness coaching, potentially leading to perjured testimony, and even the deliberate fabrication of evidence." A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. Cassie's face, which had slowly regained some color, now drained white again. "And now, Your Honor," I continued, "I would like to present Exhibit C." Sarah Rodriguez connected a small audio player to the courtroom sound system. "This is an audio recording from my home security system. After becoming suspicious of Mrs. Sterling's actions and fearing for my safety and the security of my home, I installed a discrete, legally permissible security system that records audio and video within my own property." The courtroom held its breath. The first recording played, clear as a bell, Cassie's voice, recognizable instantly. She was speaking on the phone, clearly unaware she was being recorded. "The old bird is tougher than I expected," Cassie chuckled, a chilling, calculating sound. "But Ethan is completely convinced. He's such a loyal son, really." Once we get guardianship, we can sell that house and put her somewhere she can't cause problems. It's prime real estate, you know. Don't worry about the judge. Maxwell's an old-fashioned guy who thinks family knows best. Besides, the stupid woman didn't even hire a lawyer. The courtroom erupted. People gasped. Some stood in their seats, and angry murmurs swelled through the gallery, quickly turning into shouts of outrage. Ethan, in the gallery, looked like he had been struck by lightning, his face ashen, his eyes wide with horror as he finally heard the truth of Cassie's manipulative intentions. He stared at her, then at me, a silent scream of betrayal in his eyes. Judge Maxwell's gavel crashed down repeatedly, the sound echoing through the chaos. "Order! Order in this court!" he roared, his face a thundercloud. Once a semblance of quiet was restored, he looked at me, his voice barely controlled. "Mrs. Vance, do you have any additional recordings?" "I do, Your Honor," I confirmed, my voice unwavering. The next recording began. It was Cassie's voice again, this time coaching Brenda Davies. "Just say she looked confused and disoriented," Cassie instructed, her tone sharper, impatient, wandering the aisles. "Don't mention that she was comparing prices. Make it sound like she was lost." Brenda Davies's voice, hesitant and uncertain, responded. "But she didn't look lost, Cassie. She looked like she was shopping for oatmeal." Cassie's voice turned cold, menacing. "Brenda, do you want to help me protect Ethan's inheritance or not? You know how much that house is worth. Just stick to the script." The gallery stirred again, a wave of disgust palpable in the air. Brenda Davies, who was still in the courtroom, now looked utterly devastated, her head in her hands. The final recording played. It was Cassie, instructing someone, an unidentified female voice, to call the fire department. "Just tell them you're concerned about an elderly resident, that you think you smelled smoke from her kitchen. A small fire, maybe. Just enough to get them out there." The caller hesitated. "But Cassie, what if there's no fire? Isn't that a false report?" Cassie's voice, brimming with false righteousness, replied. "It's not false if you're genuinely concerned about someone's safety, is it? We just need to make sure the court sees how unstable she is." The courtroom descended into outright chaos. Ethan had his head in his hands, openly sobbing. Several people in the gallery shouted insults at Cassie. "You monster!" one woman screamed. "Elder abuser!" another yelled. Cassie herself, her face a mask of terror, tried to bolt from the room, but was restrained by a bailiff. Judge Maxwell, his face now truly a mask of cold fury, hammered his gavel with resounding force until silence, albeit a stunned and angry one, finally returned. He turned to George Finch, his voice ice-cold, each word dripping with controlled contempt. "Mr. Finch," he asked, "does your client still wish to proceed with this petition?" George Finch, Cassie's attorney, stood rigid, his face a mask of profound embarrassment and professional ruin. Cassie, however, was having a complete breakdown. She was consulting frantically with Finch, her head violently shaking in denial, her face streaked with tears of anger, not sorrow. Her composure, once so perfectly maintained, had utterly disintegrated. Judge Maxwell's voice, now utterly devoid of emotion, sliced through the remaining tension in the room. "Mr. Finch," he stated, his gaze unyielding, "these recordings clearly document your client discussing witness coaching, orchestrating fraud upon this court, and filing false police reports. These are not minor transgressions." Suddenly, Cassie erupted, her voice a raw, unhinged shriek that echoed off the courtroom walls. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "She's lying. Those recordings are fake. She's old and paranoid, Your Honor. This is exactly the kind of paranoid behavior I've been talking about. She made all of this up." Judge Maxwell's eyes narrowed to slits. He slammed his gavel down, a sound of absolute finality. "Mrs. Sterling!" he thundered, his voice cutting through her desperate cries. "I find you in contempt of court. Bailiff, escort Mrs. Sterling to holding. She will be detained pending criminal charges for perjury, fraud, and witness tampering." and I will ensure those charges are pursued to the fullest extent of the law." As the bailiff moved swiftly towards her, Cassie struggled, still screaming, her perfectly coiffed hair now disheveled, her carefully constructed image utterly shattered. As they clamped handcuffs on her wrists and began to lead her away, she shrieked one last, desperate outburst, revealing the true, ugly motive behind her actions. "She's going to die soon anyway," she wailed, thrashing against the bailiff. "And then what happens to Ethan? What happens to my kid's inheritance? It's all supposed to be ours." Her words, raw and unfiltered, hung in the air, a chilling confirmation of my darkest suspicions. The courtroom was silent, except for the fading echoes of Cassie's screams. Ethan, who had watched the entire scene unfold with growing horror, finally pushed himself up from the gallery bench. His face was streaked with tears, his eyes red and swollen. He walked slowly, hesitantly towards me, as if unsure if he was even allowed to approach. "Mom," he whispered, his voice broken. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't know how I could have been so blind, so stupid." He reached out, his hand hovering uncertainly before taking mine. I looked at my son, the hurt still raw and fresh, but also a profound sense of relief washing over me. The truth, however painful, had finally broken through. "We'll talk later, sweetheart," I said, my voice softer than I expected. "Right now, I think we both need time to process everything that's happened." He nodded, understanding, and squeezed my hand before retreating to a corner of the courtroom, utterly devastated. Judge Maxwell, now addressing the entire courtroom, his voice calm but firm, delivered his final pronouncements. "This court dismisses the petition for emergency guardianship against Eleanor Vance with prejudice." He then turned his attention to the witnesses who had cooperated with Cassie's scheme. "Furthermore, I am ordering an immediate investigation into all individuals who made false statements or provided misleading testimony under oath in these proceedings." The message was clear. Justice, though delayed, would be served. 6 months later, the scars of that day still lingered, but a fragile healing had begun. Ethan and I were slowly, painstakingly rebuilding our relationship. Our Sunday afternoon visits in my garden had become a ritual, quiet conversations under the shade of my climbing roses, a gentle re-knitting of a bond that had been so cruelly torn. Ethan was visibly changed. The legal and emotional toll of the divorce from Cassie and the undeniable truth of her treachery had matured him in ways I had always hoped he would mature, but never under such painful circumstances. He kept me updated on his children, Chloe and Leo, who I was slowly allowed to see again, and on Cassie's impending sentencing. She was facing serious time for her multiple criminal charges. "Are you going to go, Mom?" Ethan asked one afternoon, his voice tentative. "To her sentencing, I mean?" I shook my head, tending to a particularly stubborn weed. "No, sweetheart, I don't think I will. My focus now is on us, on our family moving forward. I've had my day in court." Ethan bowed his head, a fresh wave of guilt washing over him. "She made me doubt my own memories of you, Mom," he confessed, his voice thick with emotion. "My own experiences. She was so convincing." I reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "Ethan," I said gently, "you were a victim too, just like I was. You didn't betray me deliberately. You were manipulated into it. She built a sophisticated web of lies, and she used your love and concern for me against you." He looked up, tears welling in his eyes again. "Do you forgive me, Mom? For what I did in that courtroom? For choosing her word over yours?" I thought for a moment, choosing my words carefully. "Forgiveness isn't quite the right word, Ethan. You weren't a willing participant in her scheme. You were misled, and when the truth came out, you listened. You saw it for what it was. And it's all I could have ever asked of you." Later, sitting at my desk, pen in hand, I began to write my victim impact statement. My words weren't for Cassie. Not really. They were for other victims, for anyone who had ever doubted their own perceptions, their own sanity, because of another person's insidious manipulation. I wrote about the importance of trusting one's gut, of fighting for autonomy, of finding the strength to stand up when your world is crumbling. And as I wrote, A profound sense of peace, a complete peace, settled over me. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my future.